that we often misunderstand. Thank you, sir. So what should I do next?
We're live.
Oh, okay. So, does anyone have a question? We can start out with a question. Yes.
When you're sitting
Yes.
and you're observing
Yes.
and you have questions that come up that you want to ask your teacher,
Mhm.
but then when you don't write them down and we're in there and you say what questions and there's none, is it appropriate to write those, to bring paper and pen and write those down while you're sitting?
Sure. I wouldn't necessarily keep a journal, but a little bit, like an index card or something, a reminder. Or you could borrow Sokuzan's hand. She writes on her hand. Little notes on her hand. But yeah, if you have some way of doing that that's helpful. I know back in the 70s, Allen Ginsberg was a student of Trungpa Rinpoche, and he asked the poet Allen Ginsberg, and he asked Rinpoche if he could take his his notebook, his journal, in with him and make notes because he's a poet. He said, "No, I'll do that later. Leave your journal at home." So he wasn't. He wanted him to just meditate for a couple of weeks. But it's not saying that you couldn't make a few notes of the type that you're talking about. But trying to use meditation to enhance, write more poems or something like that, or journaling. Probably should do one here and then. Like, what was the example I used recently that was so brilliant? Oh, you can't do back open heart surgery and give somebody a back rub at the same time. Isn't that clever? So the idea is to keep it very simple, to keep our meditation, keep our practice very simple. I think life is so complicated. We're doing so many different things. We're trying, the whole idea of people, actually kind of brag about multitasking. Not probably such a good thing. Multitasking is more about ignoring going on automatic. It's like driving to the store, driving to Walgreens or something like that, someplace like that, and then thinking about what you're going to have, what you're going to say to your friend tomorrow morning when you meet somebody or something like that, and kind of doing that kind of multitasking is, it's not like it's wrong, but it's like a whole lot of stuff all happening at once. It's just a way of ignoring the actual things that you might be better off looking at, like one is driving to Walgreens. More about that. Yes. Susan.
I don't know if it was 4 minutes or 40 minutes into it, but I had this overwhelming sense of relief, of tears.
Mm-hmm.
Is that normal?
Yes. Anything that happens while you're meditating is normal. So solve that.
Okay.
That would be it. Everything. It's if you're, like I've said before, if you bring all of your ancient karma and all of the causes and conditions that were behind this particular lifetime that you were living, that you were given a name and you were told who you are and introduced to your brothers and sisters or not, and given laws and rules about how you should conduct yourself, and treated really well and supported, or treated really horribly, not supported, or given a really hard time when you're really little. I talked to somebody just recently who was surprised that they're even here. They had so little support. But those kind of things it's not about blaming anybody, it's about actually taking our awareness and going back into this, and that's the way we do it. You're sitting down, you're facing the wall, and you may find yourself breaking up and going crying. Just like another version of that same similar kind of thing that is so hard to understand is everything is fine, your life is fine, and suddenly you get very, very negative feelings. And we immediately call it what? Depression. Big misunderstanding to actually name something like that, because if you have 10 people and they all have really negative emotions or feelings over a period of time with no story that they know of behind it, to label every one of them depression is a form of materialism. It's a form of scientific materialism, basically. It's basically saying, well, this is happening, this must be this. It's not willing to not name something, to just let it be what it is, and just see what that is in an individual way. So I wouldn't presume to interpret what happened, but I could say that it was normal in the sense that we understand that it could, things like that happen to everybody. If you're sitting down and you're just there, then everybody's kind of abnormal, wouldn't you say? I mean, I could just as easily say that's really abnormal. Has anybody else had that? No. So everyone has a little bit of that kind of emotion, kind of crying without really know, or some kind of sadness arising. Sometimes if you see someone cry, you might think they're really sad, and really they're just in love. They just have a lot of longing. But the emotion comes up. And so what do we do with it? Not much. You don't have to add on your little commentary. You don't have to put your little cloud up above it, the little word cloud you see in cartoons with a little arrow pointing down to the person. I think if it's pointing to it, that means they're saying it, but if there's little bubbles going up, that means they're thinking that. Yes?
Yesterday you talked about not emphasizing resolution, but when you have these strong emotions, for me, they make me want to turn away from it. How can I motivate myself to keep looking at these things that I really don't want to look at, that cause me great discomfort?
Is it happening on the cushion, you're saying? Or?
Yeah, sometimes on the cushion, sometimes right after the cushion, sometimes right before I sit down.
What was the question?
How can I motivate myself to get myself to that cushion and look at those things that I don't want to look at?
Follow my orders. I think sometimes I talk to people quite often about having well, you know where it's at, you know where the cushion is at, and you know you're chopping celery or something like that. And I'm just saying, if you see that you're not sitting much, but you have that kind of thought, I need to sit more, I need to sit. I would say, stop what you're doing. It's not gonna, if somebody called you on the phone, you'd probably stop what you were doing to answer, or not. But stop what you're doing and go into the place where you sit and sit there for 2 or 3 minutes. You're not gonna have plenty of time to come back, so that you actually have some repetition happening there. So you do that. Maybe that day you don't sit again, but you've actually touched base with that. You've actually unplugged the food processor mind for 3 minutes. So you're kind of reconditioning yourself to do that. Because ego, self-centeredness, does not want to be seen. And so our thinking process will come up and say, well, you don't have time to do that right now. Well, I know it's important, but you can do that tomorrow. Postpone, postpone, postpone. Or say, well, there's going to be a retreat this weekend, so I won't do this. And then when the retreat comes, you find reasons not to go to the retreat because you have other things to do. So I'm not sure how helpful this is, but some kind of going there anyway, just do it anyway, is helpful. More?
Well, the more I sit, even though I'm sitting to be with all things, I'm starting to feel more of a separation, where I'm seeing this human being that's suffering, and that human being is me.
Same thing.
Same thing?
Yes, it's the same thing.
Well, what is that apparent separation?
It's awareness.
But is awareness separate from the ego or that apparent individual self?
Awareness isn't separate from anything. This is why it's so important to repetition, to continually return to the issue, the problem, the suffering, the difficulty, and it can show up so many different ways. It's so very, very complicated the way the mind works. It's so, the only thing we can do is bring awareness to it so we can see what it is. This is why over time we begin to identify more and more with the awareness and less, like the image I use is the sky, more and more connection or understanding of being a sky, and less of being the clouds that arise in the sky. When we start out, we're all about trying to get this to stop and get this to start, and, passion, aggression, ignorance, trying to manipulate our life, get control. There's some people that teach, how to really, really get control of everything. And I teach kind of the opposite. I teach, see how much control you have already. Not much. So, bringing as much awareness to your life as you can. And the way we do that in this practice is sit down on a cushion and just insist on seeing what is true for yourself. And that might be looking at a whole lot of lies before you have some kind of a breakthrough that doesn't necessarily have a strong central authority going on, or ego. Lead it.
So yesterday, in my interview with you, I was talking about feeling, having a lot of pain and sadness, and you said, "Are you suffering?" And so this is a question I texted you this morning, which is, what is the texture and tone of not suffering versus, because I couldn't answer that question. So because how would I know if I were suffering or not?
You don't know. You know if you're suffering or not?
I don't know.
Okay. So the whole idea of suffering or unhappiness or discontent, or however you want to look at that, or the traditional teaching in Buddhism is there's three types of suffering: the pain, which is like, open heart surgery, the extreme physical kind of stuff, or even mental anguish over something, the pain. And then there's the pain of alternation, which is the contrast between things are going really good, but then we know we're suffering. Even though things are going good, we're suffering because we know it's not going to last, because of impermanence. We know that so instead of it just being here and enjoying what is happening, we're worried about the future, which of course is causes us to actually abandon the very pleasure we were having, or so to speak. And then the last one is the pain of the composite, or the pain of conditioned existence, which people get flashes of, but it is said in the teachings, as the traditional teachings, that only bodhisattvas of the first bhumi, or the first stage, of which there are 10 or 11 or 12, or which tradition you're looking at, the person who has really begun to see beyond a separate, see that there really isn't a solid separate being. There is no really solid being called me. It's there, but it's not solid. That only that person, or that awareness, or that person who has stepped into the bodhisattva path, whether it's in this tradition or some other one that doesn't have the name bodhisattva path or bodhisattva, a person who has stepped beyond the personal identity is able to see the pain of conditioned existence. In other words, or the pain of the composite. They're basically in pain all the time because they're alive, and they are not separate from anything, and everywhere they look, they see suffering. But they also see that there's no one suffering. That the suffering is just arising, just the tension, just the beingness of being a separated entity or a living organism with 6 sense fields and 6 sense objects coming in. You actually begin to see that and see that life is suffering, and the cause of its continuation is a desire to have it different, the craving to have something to cover it up. More.
The craving to have it different.
However things are, there's difficulty or suffering, or there might be one of those 3 kinds of pain, or all 3 of them. There could be almost anything going on with each person individually. But then if we have a strong desire to get out of that into something else, that will create even more. Then the suffering becomes more like a personal situation. Then it's more about the ego mind.
So it's the craving to have it different. Is the solution to that staring at the wall?
That's the beginning of sharpening the blade. And the blade is the sword of Manjushri, the double-edged sword that cuts this way and that way at the same time. No self, no other. Just a traditional image of trying to, somebody who understood this, let's see, how can we think up something that allows us to use that as a teaching situation. So this is why we say, may all beings enjoy happiness, the root of happiness. Be free from suffering, the root of suffering. May they not be separated from the great happiness, devoid of suffering. May they dwell in the great equanimity that is free from passion, aggression, and prejudice. We pray for others. We see the suffering and we pray for them. Yes, sir, Jim.
You may have just partly answered this question, but kind of same question for you to ask. What's the antidote for the suffering that comes from the second suffering?
Pain of alternation.
Yeah.
The antidote would be stay here. There is no past or future. We're not saying that there isn't something that happens that looks like time, but we're always here. There's always this. There isn't anything else but this. And it shows. Wait a minute. It shows up as the vacillation of forms going this way and that way, called impermanence. Things arise and they disappear. Anything that arises is going away. Who you are actually has not arisen. In the Zen tradition, it's called, in all traditions, it's called unborn, unceasing, with a nature like the sky. Who you actually are is like the sky, not going anywhere. But we think we're a cloud, or we think we're threatened. So we protect ourselves. And we have all this incredible sensitivity to everything through all the 6 sense fields. More.
So through our awareness practice, through time staring at the wall, the realization of unborn, unceasing grows and kind of provides the antidote, that
Yep.
knowledge.
Yep. You got it. Have to do it a lot. That's the good news is there's a way to do this. The bad news is it takes a long time. You have to keep doing it, and I've got teeth to brush. Why should I go and face the wall? I've got things to do, people to see. I got to do this. I got to do that. We get wrapped up in that particular aspects of our life, and we say, yeah, spiritual path is good, meditation is good, but I just don't have time to meditate. So in our world, because we are not all living in a monastery, which is why they have monasteries, we're all, if you consider yourself on a spiritual path, and the traditional term would be a yogi, as a man, or yogini, or someone who is disciplined. So a householder yogi, a householder yogini. In other words, somebody who's on a spiritual path but also has a family, has a job, but sets aside time so that he or she can sit down, train the mind, sit in front of the wall, sit in front of the floor, hold still and watch what moves and watch the way the mind keeps adding up, adding up, adding up. I shouldn't, it should be, it shouldn't be, that shouldn't happen. I need to do more of this, less of that. This is constant chatter and lobbying in the mind for some kind of change.
Sokuzan, chain of alternation, how would you recommend dealing with a physical situation that has manifested as chronic pain, but it's not always there, and then fear of sitting on a cushion, which makes it worse, and yet it's not the way that it just was. It isn't as bad as it was, but there still is anxiety about sitting there with it.
It's an awareness practice. So there's nothing to change. This is your path. You're talking about yourself.
Yes.
This is your path. And so wanting that to be different, to be something else, it actually puts tension on that whole thing. And actually, it's like pulling blinders, or it's like creating a scrim. The talk you're having with yourself is like putting a scrim over what you need to see. And so what's happening to you is your path. It is whatever. It's like what Susan said. Is it normal to sit here and start weeping? That's her path, right? And it would change into something else. That may never happen again. And 3 years from now, she may say, "Why don't I ever cry anymore?" Sokuzan. I said, "Well, it was probably the last hurrah there. Never gonna cry again." Or you might cry over and over. It's so different with each person that this is something, having done this for a while and talked to people about this for a long time, I see how incredibly different it is for each person. The only thing I can say that as a general recommendation is find a way to sit a lot. If you can't, if it's painful to sit, then stand up. If it's painful to do that, then walk. Find a way to hold still on some level. Even walking, if you're doing an awareness practice, is a form of stillness because it's so repetitive. It's just walking, just like mantra practice is a form of stillness because it's so repetitive. I don't care how fascinating the mantra is. If you do 100,000 of them, they're pretty boring. On the other hand, it's also, you could say it's kind of soothing to do that. Yes?
I think I've developed some conditioned aversion to sitting because it was so uncomfortable that even though now it's not like that, I still have the aversion. How might I work with that?
You're here.
Yes.
You're asking me.
Thank you.
Do it anyway. Am I your teacher?
Yes.
Do it anyway.
I will.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what I'm saying is that kind of repetition seems to work. At least go in and check in with your altar, which you should have one. Go in and sit down for a few minutes. Stand up. Stand, put your hands in this position. Or in some position that is symmetrical, that is not something that's casual. The body follows mind, mind follows body. The body in this position, the mind does that too. You can feel it. Just if you're sitting like this, if you go like this, if you go like this, even this is a very, very soft, natural mudra that a lot of people do. If you see a man or a woman standing and doing this, their mind has this kind of shape, at least for the time that they're doing that.
So similar to what you said earlier, if I sense this aversion that's keeping me from the cushion, then maybe to go in and sit for even 3 minutes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Or stand there. But that's what the altar, that's what the cushion is for. I myself, not recently, because I don't practice at all anymore. So you should ask questions about that if you haven't. I would go in and just look at it, and then I would sit on it, and then I would get up, and then I would just maybe say a few cuss words. But I wouldn't have a hot mic or anything. So yes, find some way to do some repetition there where it gets you in, so there's a reminder. I mean, everyone is going to be, some people can just sit, not many, but some people just sit a lot. I have, now that we have the technology of a phone, I have people texting me from different, not a lot, because I don't have a lot of students, but if people text and find it's helpful just to send me a text, I'm sitting. There's a person in Providence, Rhode Island, who may be watching. Julia, she sends me sitting, maybe 10 minutes later, not sitting, or done sitting. So it's not so much a matter of time. If you can do 2 or 3 hours, that's good. But if you can only do 10 minutes, then do 10 minutes. It takes a lot of energy to just get up, stop what you're doing, go over, and especially for sometimes when it's so difficult. Sometimes it's just like every voice in your head is saying, don't do this, you can't do this, you don't have time to do this, do something else. But if your inspiration is to awaken, to be completely sane, then you'll find a way to do that. And then at some point, your whole attitude will change. It's called bodhicitta. And that's when there isn't anything but this. And then you just help or serve wherever you're called. You don't do anything else. Drink coffee. With cream. Unless somebody stops you. Yes.
So wanting things to be different than they are,
Yes.
related to suffering. What about wanting to remodel the house or get a different job and thinking about making change
What
in
about
the
it?
future?
While you're sitting?
No, well, sometimes.
Okay. What's your question? I understand.
So is that also problematic to spend time and mental energy planning?
No, it's not problematic. You're aware of it. You're telling me about it. So there are people who are doing that who have there's no atmosphere, there's no space around that. They're just totally materialistic. Not wrong. They're not ready to do this. This is not. Please don't sell anybody on meditation. Respect people. The people that need to meditate will come and ask you about it. Will come and say, what do you do? How do you do this? I would like to do this. But don't necessarily, I'm not saying if somebody's having a conversation, if somebody talks to you about it, you could say, well, you could try this, you could try meditation practice. But you would also probably maybe warn them a little bit that you can't just meditate for a few minutes a day, something like that. It really has to be, like any exercise, you can't pick up a weight and go, doesn't work. Meditation doesn't work. How do you know? Because I have tried it. It doesn't work. What do you mean by work? Well, I meditated and I didn't feel any better. But that's also awareness, even that. So more.
Does spending time a lot thinking about changing things in the future, is that a setup for suffering, a setup for depression and discontent?
Not necessarily.
Okay. Just
Not necessarily.
entertainment. Could be just entertainment.
Pardon me?
Could it be just entertainment?
It could be. The important thing here is awareness. It's not what arises in it. What arises in your awareness or what arises in your awareness, they just arise. What's arising in your awareness is ideas, concepts, stories about things. But what I hear awareness, I don't hear that you're all attached to that. There is some attachment, but you wouldn't be asking this question if you weren't already aware of the attachment. So I'm not going to step into your territory with some kind of protocol for what you should or shouldn't do. I respect you. You're an adult woman, and you talking to me and asking me about it, and my response would be practice a lot, not change your thinking. have to really respect people's thinking, people's confusion. If you're going to fundamentally help somebody, you can't go in and do the very thing that you know isn't going to work, trying to rewire somebody by just telling them stuff. This is what they do in the Marine Corps. Works a little bit for a while, and then something gets very fishy about that, even though you're only 18. Anything else? Any other questions? Yes.
Sokuzan, so distraction, whether it's materials and buying things, or getting high and smoking pot, or
You
whatever.
Do that? You do that?
Yes, whatever it may be.
Got a hot mic, you know.
I'm legal.
Darn, that's right. Forget about that.
So recognizing the discomfort of knowing that hiding is going on, willful ignorance is occurring, but then the pull to continue the ignorance to protect oneself from knowing, from looking. Is it better to, how does one work with it best? On that spot at that time, or just sit?
Probably both. It seems to be necessary to do a lot of sitting practice. And there's people say, well, I meditate in the woods, or I have a much better meditation. I'm not interested in good meditations. I get more excited about a horrible meditation, because then then there's a good chance that you're actually looking at the garbage that you need to look at. So I would say it's a little bit of each there, but the idea around that is not so important to try to come up with some kind of answer, because it's going to go this way and that way, and this will get stronger, get weaker. The most important thing you can do, talking to you directly, not necessarily to somebody else, but is bring that whole thing to the cushion as much as possible and watch it dissolve, because it will. You know, and whether it's a cushion, or whether it's standing facing a wall, or whether you need to walk a little bit very slowly, you can do some of that. But find a way to train your awareness to see what is moving, rather than join up with what's moving, add, subtract, divide. Constant kind of round and around, which is circular. It's like samsara. It's the wheel of life and death, life and death. Not only the life and death of our bodies, but the life and death of your thought patterns. Every time whenever you're sitting and thoughts arise, do nothing with them. Respect. It's like every thought is like a living being. They're born. The thought is born. It hangs out for a little while and it goes. Don't interfere. You could say, none of your business. None of your business. They're none of your business. They're none of your business. Now what?
Just sit.
Yeah. Cool. Further questions? John. I mean,
I was gonna roll.
I get my tap. Other people have these names, and I can't keep them straight. But I'm working on it. If I call you by a name that is not your name, please remind me. I mean, I know that as we get elderly, we kind of give people a break, but I would rather be reminded, so that I can actually straighten up a little bit. Go ahead.
As this saga expands and we include new people, how can we support each other in meditating without meddling?
You practice. You go practice. You set up a time, or whatever your schedule is, if you have one. We all come to work on time, hopefully. You always do everything else on time. You don't have to schedule brushing your teeth necessarily, or doing there's things that we do on time. And say just take the sitting practice and insert that somewhere, so that's okay. It's 7 o'clock. It's time to sit, and don't evaluate your sitting at all. At all. When I say don't evaluate it, you can notice that you tend to automatically evaluate it. Well, this felt pretty good. Well, this one I was kind of crying. This next one, no, I'm not. This one I feel really agitated. So it's the idea of taking a little snapshot or a half hour, an hour video or a recording of what's happening in your mind for that time. They're always going to be a little bit different. They're never going to be the same. There's something that doesn't change. Find out what it is. Yes.
Is yours always the same?
What?
Your snapshots?
I don't take snapshots.
If you did.
I'll leave that up to Raquel. If I did, would they always be the same? No. Or yes and no. Kind of, sort of. No, it's the way I'm talking about it is a way of talking or teaching it. And someone may not do this at all, not make any sense. And someone may do it for a little while, and another person may not do it, and then 2 years from now start thinking about that. Yes.
Because your snapshot of you would be the sky, which would always be the same. And
Or not.
you're snapshotting the clouds. and
The
that's-
clouds in the sky are the same thing, but it has to be realized. You have to start out by wherever you're at. And so the idea is most people are grasping at clouds, so then it's when you talk about the sky. But then if you grasp at the sky, then we'll talk about clouds. Depends on who it is, depends on where they're at. Fundamentally, there isn't any location. Everything is without time and without location. And it manifests as, that's why they call the Buddha the Tathagata, the one who comes thusly. No past, no future. He or she just presents themselves as this, and it's always this. The body can die, but this can't die. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Or not. Maybe it's something else. It's noon. Any other question?
A couple clarification questions.
Boom.
So, earlier did I hear you say you don't practice anymore? Or was that wrong?
No, maybe that's what I said, yeah.
Why?
I don't want to. You practice?
It's a good answer.
You practice?
Yes,
Why?
because I want to. What motivates you to continue teaching something that you don't practice?
Suffering. Suffering, everywhere, suffering. Unless you don't, until you don't find an identity, a solid identity anymore, you'll keep working out of an identity. Meditation practice over time will eventually show you there isn't anyone here. There's no one to practice. There's no one to not practice. So at the risk of sounding silly, of course I do. I could say that I'm always practicing, or I'm always not practicing, or I'm kind of practicing, not practicing, or I'm not practicing.
Makes sense.
No, it doesn't. Make any sense.
Extremely active and doing nothing.
Yeah, it's completely ridiculous. Can't find a center. It's a centerless fringe.
And then my other clarification question was in your analogy about the clouds and the sky. The clouds are the thoughts that are coming up and the emotions that are coming up and then going, because anything that arises soon falls. However, does that mean that the sky you're indicating is like the gap between the thoughts?
Something like that. It's the awareness that accommodates. And when we start identifying more and more with the awareness, it's more like a sky. And you could say it even gets wider because we just see things so clearly that are rising in it. And when they go away, there's just sky. When they come back, then we're ready to accommodate. But complete transcendence, there isn't even a sky. There's no clouds, there's no sky. There isn't anything, and yet there's everything. So it's called not two. In the ancient Indian tradition, it's called Advaita, or non-dual. And not two. There isn't two things anywhere. What?
No?
Oh, good. That's what I thought was there. A hollow girl. Very good. Good questions. Thank you. Any other further questions before? Yes, Jim?
I'm trying to say this exactly. When we sit and watch what it's not,
Yes.
watch what continues to move,
Yeah.
that space between what's moving seems to be something to watch as well.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
I think it is. It gets a little conceptual, but we have to start somewhere. So
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah, thank you.
so that shows up too.
Yeah, because you say pay attention or appreciate the space in which
Things occur.
things occur.
So an appreciation means to let it be what it is. Appreciation doesn't mean necessarily seeing something as of value compared to something that's of no value. It's actually having a sense of appreciation or openness. Like if you go into this traditional way of going into a gallery and looking at paintings, or it doesn't mean you're gonna love everything there, but you appreciate that there are things there. Appreciate that.
Yeah, since you said that, since I wrote down that you said that a day or two ago, that seems to be appearing more in my sitting.
That's
And it seems to have the effect too of the thoughts that are coming, there's less movement. It's kind of a sense of that space that's there.
very good.
Which
Sounds
I
good.
appreciate.
And everyone, pardon me?
I appreciate your having said that, just
Good.
because.
So that kind of concept would be really supportive for some people, and maybe not so for others. Further questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.